Let's put those buttonholes in that scare people so much. Not really that hard. You need to put them on so they look good. And then on the top, the first buttonhole is always going to go in horizontally, and we need to mark the center of the waistband so we know that is where it's going to sit. Now, you don't want this button to end up over too much to the edge. You want it to sit exactly above center of the placket. So measure across where that is, and that needs to be 1.45 centimeters or half an inch, right? So make sure that that sits there so that your button will not end up sitting over the edge. Now you want to see where you want the smaller type buttons to sit. I've used 4 smaller ones and 1 big one, but you could of course use big ones all the way along. That's also very nice, especially if you make it sort of sailor style. So measure this out, but the important thing is that the top button should only be down about 3 centimeters. If you're using a bigger button, maybe 4 centimeters. So you mark that across and you mark the center of the placket, and then you go down to where you had your second button where it looked good and measure that, and that's a distance you want to replicate then for all the other buttons. What is really important is that you have got a good amount standing open from the hem upwards. That should be about 8 centimeters. So don't make this like very dinky, putting one button right above the hem. That does never look good. If you're using an electronic machine, you can just put your button into the end to determine the size of the buttonhole. I've done 2 sample ones. One has a tighter zigzag and the other one has got a looser one, and I go for the looser one. That looks much better. I cut it open and check that my buttonhole is actually the correct size. On a lot of machines, especially the Genomis I've used in my courses, the buttonholes would come out way bigger than they needed to be. On my Pfaff, it's perfect every time. I have to say hurrah for Pfaff there. That makes a beautiful buttonhole. So I know that's correct. So I'm going to put this buttonhole in first. Move down your buttonhole sensor, and I'm using my standard buttonhole, which is the number 33. All I have to do is put it exactly on that mark so that the needle now faces that little cross. Okay, so my buttonhole works backwards, so you need to make sure that you put it under so that the skirt is to the left of you. And then you just put the buttonhole in. Make sure that your little gathers do not touch that sensor. You want to hold that down, because if they touch the sensor, the buttonhole will stop moving, and that's really annoying. There's the one thing I do not like about electronic buttonholes. That will never happen with a mechanical one, but overall the electronic one is easier to use because the machine does everything for you. Now I've got my buttonhole in. And it will sit right on that edge there, and that's all good. Now I'm going to do the little one, and I'm going to put my button in again, and then I'm going to put my buttonhole in here. And again, this time I move it and so that my fabric or my skirt now lies to the right side of my buttonhole, so it can move backwards. And the good news here is that now my gathers are not in the way. They're not in the way of the sensor at all. That's a better way of working, so that you don't have the fabric there. But because it works backwards, of course, you know, the horizontal buttonhole, you just had to grin and bear that. And as long as you're aware that you need to hold your gathers, make sure that they don't touch the sensor, you'll be fine. So I'm putting in my first buttonhole exactly the same way, looking absolutely fab. Cut off the threads, go to the next one, move it down so the needle is exactly above that little cross. You can also check that your buttonhole foot sits right central on your placket, and then you just press go. That's the beauty of an electronic machine. It just does it all for you. I love how it does that. You can watch the sensor go between those plastic bits and senses when it needs to finish. So it's really cool. Now I'm going to cut the buttonhole open. So fold it in half right on top of each other, and then I take my scissor and I'll just cut into the edge here. And then I cut from side to side. You can use a very sharp embroidery scissor as well. I've always done it like this, so this is what I'm comfortable with. Now, how to put on the buttons is that you want to go to the furthest point of your buttonhole, and that's where you're going to put your button. I'm even moving it 2 millimeters further over. And now you want to make sure that when you put it on, that you have a little bit of looseness in there. Some people use gadgets. I just use my thumb. So I always have my thumb underneath it. That seems to be the right distance anyway, so that we create a little bit of space. So when the skirt's done up, the other part of the skirt, which sits in between the button and the waistband, that those bits actually have room. And I will get a little bit of a stem. So final time going through, and now I hold it nice and taut and I wrap around the thread in a downward motion so that I almost get like a little mushroom, yeah? So like a little stem. And what I want to do now is just pull that thread away. First, I'm going to go through a loop. And then I go and come out anywhere, but you have to go in between the layers, of course, not coming out the other side. Do up that button. Now we're going to put the buttons in the center of the buttonhole, and I just need a new thread. So I'm just going to show you how to get the knot in. Thread it through and then put it on your finger, wrap around the thread, put your thumb on it, and then pull it through, and voila, you got a little knot. So I'm going to the center all the way down. Oh look, it's actually matching the pattern of my placket and the skirt as well. Well, that is like complete luck. I did not measure that or look at that at all. So I'm going to sew my button on the same way as I did the top button, and then all the rest of the buttons, and voila, my beautiful skirt is finished. And I sure hope you enjoyed watching me do all this. And if you want to put in cam snaps, you can now go to the cam snap video and have a look at how that works. Thank you very much for being part of this course, and I hope to see you soon again for another project with Frocks and Frolics.